Okay, so we're going to talk about possibly the most controversial movie about 2014. I'm of course talking about The Interview, starring Seth Rogen and James Franco. Now, I have to say, here in the UK, I don't think at least a lot of cinema goers maybe know the controversy that surrounds this movie, as it tends to be more of an American issue. There are a few, of course, like myself, who are kind of, I guess, a bit more in tune with what's going on in the world of cinema, but there are some who don't know, who that I spoke to. So I'm just going to kind of touch on briefly about that, then I'll kind of go into the review of the film. But just to give you some context about what this film is, as I say, it stars Seth Rogen and James Franco, and basically James Franco is a sort of talk show host, and Seth Rogen is his producer, and they kind of basically do celebrity kind of interviews and things like that, and they're not taken too seriously. However, it turns out that Kim Jong-un, who is the dictator leader of North Korea, is a fan of the show, and they basically managed to secure an interview with him in North Korea. And while they're there, basically, the CIA get wind of it and want them to assassinate Kim Jong-un, and they kind of almost coerced into doing it. And when they go over there, that's their firm intention, is to kind of assassinate him. But James Franco ends up sort of becoming friendly with him, and Seth Rogen's character kind of has a romance blossoming with a kind of female officer in North Korea, and hilarity ensues basically. So, why the controversy, in case you don't know? Well, this has been really an issue with, say, North Korea and America. With North Korea really offence of this movie, and if you are aware of the hackings that happened with Sony, a lot of fingers are pointing to North Korea. There are some doubts, however, and basically North Korea are blamed to some degree for these kind of hacks that have kind of related to this sort of personal information about sort of Sony employees and films and things like that. And then more seriously, threats are made against any cinema that dared show The Interview. And then basically what happened was all the cinema chains started backing out of showing the film, and then Sony completely pulled the movie. And that, a lot of people saw that the kind of giving into terrorism, which of course America's policy is not to do that. Only for Sony to then release this movie as a limited release on cinema, sort of independent cinemas and online, which is where I saw it. So I don't think anything will come of this, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be one of those things. North Korea, if they are behind it, are known for being kind of sort of quite blustery. But we've got to remember, these things can escalate. World War I started with an assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So these things can escalate. So, you know, it's a little worrying, I guess, but I don't think anything will come of it. I do think it was a little silly almost, if I'm going to be controversial myself here. What do they expect North Korea not to kind of be offended to this? Well, you know, why would they be? So I do think the actual premise of this one was possibly a little bit risky going into it. If a foreign country made a film about assassinating, you know, Obama, I'm sure Americans would take offence to it. So I don't understand why maybe this wasn't thought of beforehand. There you go, it's made and there it is. So what's the film actually like? Well, okay, this controversy has probably given this movie more talking time than any other film, certainly a comedy film at least, in 2014. And it is a funny movie. If you have seen the sort of Seth Rogen, James Franco films before, stuff like This Is the End, it's kind of that same sort of humour, sort of lots of kind of stoner style humour, if you like, you know, drunken scenes, that sort of thing. I have to say, I did actually quite enjoy it. It is quite a funny movie, but I think the comedy kind of declines as the sort of film goes on, and they kind of maybe milk jokes a little bit too often. It starts out pretty strong. There's quite hilarious at the beginning with Eminem, and where you have obviously James Franco and Seth Rogen, who are, you know, have a great on-screen chemistry because of their sort of history together. When they're on-screen together, you know, it is pretty funny. But once they get into North Korea, they kind of do their own sort of things to a certain degree. And I think the comedy starts to sort of stretch a little bit and gets sort of less funny as the film goes on. Also, I was a little bit surprised, kind of the last portion of this film is actually quite violent. More violent than I thought it would be, and there are actually quite a lot of sort of on-screen deaths and things like that, and it does get fairly brutal almost. So if you're looking at more of a light-hearted comedy, then again this is going to be a little bit jarring. But overall, I thought this was probably a fairly average comedy. It wasn't bad. Obviously, there's this kind of controversy surrounding it. It's kind of maybe giving it more importance than it sort of would otherwise have deserved. And probably if North Korea was behind this kind of the issue, that they've maybe made this film more in people's forefront of their mind than it otherwise would have been. So, you know, they've only themselves to blame in that respect. But it was an okay movie, probably slightly above average, but I don't think it was anything outstanding. To be honest, I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10. The performances were, you know, were all okay. Seth Rogen is more of the straight guy, whilst James Franco is kind of more the kind of the wild card here. But they still kind of do that sort of those, you know, those sort of same tropes that they always do. There's obviously you know, lots of talk about drugs and sort of things like that, and getting drunk on screen and all that sort of stuff. So there's no real big departure from either of them. And like I said, I do think the comedy kind of dries up a little through them as the movie goes on. So 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? And what's your views on all the controversy? Leave me a comment and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.